I want to talk about gathering resources in Starcraft. This is basically gathering minerals and gathering Vespene. Now, obviously, gathering resources is a very important part of Starcraft gameplay. Resources allow you to build an army, build structures, get research, but there are a few aspects of resource harvesting that players are either not aware of or that they do not consider when they execute a build or when they make certain decisions. The goal of this video is to talk about how the engine works when it comes to resources in general, and then hopefully provide players with a good set of tools so that they can make better informed decisions throughout the course of the game and when they want to execute their build order. So we're going to talk about how the mining works, what the mining cycles are, and then we're going to move on from there by talking about some of the more intricate details of mining. Throughout the course of the video, you may hear me refer to something called a mining cycle. So over here, I refer to a mining cycle as a worker that begins to harvest a resource. He's done the harvesting, he goes to the primary structure to deposit the resources, and then he moves back to the resource patch. So that is one mining cycle. It's just something to keep in mind as I refer to various aspects of the cycle when I talk about timings and whatnot. So the first thing to know is that only one worker may harvest a particular resource at a given point in time. So I'm going to try and show you what I mean by this. Over here we have a bunch of SCVs that are surrounding this mineral patch. I'm going to select all these SCVs and I'm going to right click on this mineral patch and order them to harvest this resource. Now, the engine limits the number of workers that can harvest the resource to 1. So as long as there is a worker that is harvesting a resource, the other workers will not begin to harvest the resource until that worker is done. And you will sometimes see this on ladder games in the early game harassment, where a player will try and harass their opponent by sending a probe or an SCV or a drone to start poking at resource patches. And this is what they're doing. They are stopping the opponent's workers from gathering that particular resource. So let me show you what I mean by that. I have all these workers selected, and I'm going to right click this mineral patch. See over here now, only this guy has harvested the resource. Now this guy, all these other guys are actually not doing anything. They're just watching this resource right now. And once they start stacking up, it's a little bit more difficult to see, but only one worker is harvesting that resource. So the general rule is only one worker may gather or harvest a particular resource at any given time. That's something to keep in mind. Now there's one exception to this rule, and this is Raynor's mules. So a mule in general ignores this limit. So over here I have a bunch of orbital CCs. I can drop as many mules as I want. Unfortunately I don't have a rapid fire set, but you see here, all these mules can harvest this resource without giving the worker limits. They do not interact with the worker. The workers will also individually mine the resource. Mules can harvest irrespective of the worker count on a particular mineral patch. With this one worker limit in mind, let's have a closer look at what a mining cycle looks like. So we have this SCV, who seems to be messing around with his drill a little bit. But let's send him mining and let him stabilize and start returning the resources to command center. Now take a look at what's happening over here. This mineral field is being harvested by this guy, but during the time where he is moving to the command center and back, this mineral field is not being harvested. So we can increase our gather rate by sending another guy to start mining at this time. So just wait for these two to stabilize again before we start the next phase. So over here, we have two workers that are now mining, and what we have is when one worker is moving to and from the command center, the other guy starts mining this mineral field. And this is what's called the optimal gather rate, because these workers are operating at almost 100% efficiency. You can see that there is a little bit of variance in their movement speed and whatnot, and with regards to their acceleration and their mining rate, and sometimes they will overlap a little bit, but for the most part, 100% of the time, these workers are doing something. They are either harvesting a resource or they are moving to the command center. Now, if we take a third worker and add him in, and we wait for this to stabilize a little bit. So what we have now is called a maximum mining rate. The maximum mining rate means that at least one of your workers is not going to be doing something throughout the course of the mining cycle. But what it does mean is that your mineral field or your resource patch is being harvested 100% of the time. So there is no point in time in this mining cycle where this mineral field is not being harvested by a worker. This is your maximum mining rate. And the reason why this is your maximum mining rate is because if you were to add more workers, you are not going to get any benefit to your resource income as a result, because there is already a worker always that is waiting at the mineral field, waiting to start harvesting, because there is another one that is already there. So this is the difference. You have a maximum mining rate, which is 3 workers on the mineral field, where 1 worker is waiting to harvest. So you are gathering the maximum amount of resources at this point in time. And then you have your optimal mining rate, where you have 2 workers at the mineral patch, and this is where you are optimizing the efficiency of your workers to close to 100%. The next thing to know is that movement speed does not affect the resource harvesting rate of a worker. The movement speed only affects the movement speed between a mineral patch and the primary structure. So I'm going to put side by side what the harvest rates look like compared to the movement speed when I have 2 different zones available over here. Notice that when the movement speed buff is being applied, the worker moves faster between the mineral patch and the hatchery, which is expected. However, its mining rate, or the harvest rate, which is the time that it takes once it reaches the mineral patch to pull out a certain number of resources, that remains the same. It is unchanged, regardless of whether you have the movement speed buff or no movement speed buff applied. The other thing to know is that not all resource patches are created equal. Sometimes a resource patch may be closer to the primary structure than others, and you might have an intuition as to when this is the case. For example, in missed opportunities, it just looks like this Vespene geyser is a lot closer to this Vespene geyser, and I'll put a freeze frame for you so you can see it from a different angle to confirm that that is the case. Now, because the geysers are spaced differently, it may affect your optimal and your maximum gather rates, and the only way to actually be sure is to test it. So we're going to take 3 workers, we're going to put them onto this Vespene geyser and wait for it to stabilize, and what you have to do is you just have to watch. So I'm going to try and switch it from a different angle. I think it might be a little bit easier to see. But notice how when the worker reaches the Vespene geyser, he is ready to go and he enters and he starts mining instantly. What this means is that even though you have the 3 out of 3 over here, as the game suggests, which means that you are at your, which the game suggests is your maximum gather rate, you're not actually at your maximum. What you can do is you can assign a 4th worker over here, and now you will see that there is a small amount of downtime between the workers, and you'll notice that this looks a lot more like a regular gather cycle. So what's happened over here is that even though the game is saying that you need 3 for your maximum gather rate, you actually need 4 because this geyser is spaced a little bit further away from the primary structure. So one thing you might ask is, why is the game giving me the wrong information? And the reason why is because there's no real calculation that the game implements to figure out what the optimal or the maximum saturation is for a particular primary structure. All it does is it looks within 8 range of the primary structure and counts all the resource patches that are there, and it basically says 3 workers is what the ideal number of workers that is required for each of those mineral patches. And what I've done is I've shown you roughly what that range looks like for that same command center on missed opportunities. And what you can see is that the Vespine Geyser that is further away from the command center just barely lies within that 8 range search. And if you take a look at the other Vespine Geyser, that one is essentially completely covered within that area. It's much, much closer. But each of those get counted as 3 workers per resource patch. This also applies to the mineral patches. As you can see, there are some mineral patches that are much closer than others, and this is exactly why it is very difficult to calculate an exact number for what your income is going to be given a certain number of workers. It's because it really depends on the mineral patches and where they are positioned relative to the primary structure. Now, because some mineral patches are closer to the primary structure than other mineral patches, it means that they will not need the full 3 workers to reach the maximum gather rate. And so, even though a primary structure will say that you require 21 workers to reach the maximum mineral gather rate, you'll need a little bit less than that. And generally, the optimized number is about 19 out of 21, so basically just 2 workers less than the recommended number on the primary structure. And that'll basically give you approximately, or very closely, the maximum gather rate that you can get for that area. So the take home is this: only 1 worker may harvest a given resource patch at any given time. As a result, you have 2 possible mining rates for your economy. You have an optimal mining rate, which is where all your workers are doing something during the course of the mining cycle. This could be harvesting a resource or transporting it to the command center and back. You also have a maximum mining rate, and this is the mining rate where all the resource patches are being harvested at any given time. Movement speed does not affect the harvest rate, but it does affect the movement speed between the resource patch and the command center. And finally, the resource patches are not all at the same distance from the command center, which means that you will have to take a look and see which resource patches are further away and optimize accordingly. So the whole motivation behind this video is basically to answer the following question: should I put a stat zone, and should I spread satellites towards my allies' base at the start of the game? And there's a lot of debate, and there's a lot of heated debate behind this, and there are a lot of people mad at each other. And the answer, as with all things in co-op, is it really depends. And it depends on a number of factors. The first one, and the most important factor here, is what are you looking for from your co-op gameplay? If you are looking to just have fun, and you're playing with a friend, you do whatever you like. There is no right or wrong way here. However, if you are a player that's looking to optimize your resources and optimize your gameplay, then the answer is, again, it depends. As you can see over here, Stetman, this is my own base, so Stetman gets an extra speed boost as a result. But you can see I am at 14 out of 21 workers, so that is roughly 2 workers per mineral patch. And you can see that I'm very, very close to a maximum mining rate. There is a little bit of idle time between some of these workers. If you just pay attention a little bit, there is some idle time between some of these workers, which means that I am pretty much at my maximum gather rate at only 2 workers per mineral patch. So that's something to consider. If you are looking to try and optimize your gameplay, then you have to take a number of factors into consideration. The first thing is the map that is being played. How many satellites does it require to move a stat zone from your starting hatchery location to your allies' location? Certain maps, like Oblivion Express, have the players' bases very, very close to each other. So I could use maybe about 3 satellites to spread a stat zone to my ally's base, like so. 3 satellites, and my ally gets the benefit of the stat zone. But consider a map like Temple of the Past. The player bases are actually really far away, so you'd have to spread a lot of satellites to get the stat zone to your ally's base. That's a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. You have to spread about 6 satellites to get a stat zone to your ally's base. The other thing to consider is your ally. What commander are they playing? Certain commanders, like Zagara, ramp up really quickly, and they're not really going to get the benefit from the stat zones even if you give it to them, because remember that you are capped in terms of your mining rate. And Zagara is the kind of commander where she's able to saturate her mineral line really quickly. Other commanders, though, might heavily benefit from a stat zone. Think of a slow commander, someone like Sukov or someone like Swan. Having that extra speed boost will help them improve their economy. The exception to this whole saturation deal is, of course, Raynor, because he has access to his mules and they ignore any limitations that have been placed on these mineral lines. So Raynor commanders might actually be able to get a benefit from these stat zones because their mules will actually travel faster from the mineral fields to the command center. Now, the other thing to also consider about your ally is your ally's skill level. What kind of player are they? Are they a casual player, or are they someone that actually knows how to optimize their build and how these mining rates work? Because if an ally is getting a stat zone, a speed stat zone onto their mineral line, then it is in their best interest to try and optimize the usage of that stat zone. In this case, what would be required is a worker transfer between their main mineral patch and their expansion mineral patch to make sure that they are not oversaturating their mineral line on their main. The other thing to consider is the enemy attack wave timing. On missions like Rifts to Core Hall, the attack wave spawns really early in the mission at 2 minutes, and it can be a little bit difficult. But having a stat zone in your ally's base can actually make it can allow you to survive in such an early stage in the game, and you can do some weird things like a bunch of probes, a bunch of drones, and just go and keep killing them. Kill the attack wave by pulling the boys, just like so. And show Amon that your workers are actually tougher than his own units. Unfortunately, over here it looks like Phoenix got the short end of the stick, but you get the idea. So I hope that this video provided you with a little bit more insight onto how mining works in Starcraft, and hopefully allow players to make better decisions and just have a better intuition as to what they can do to improve their economy and optimize their gameplay.